Afternoon. So welcome to the next edition of Read Along with Wriggles. We're going to read Casino Royale, which is definitely on my top 5 of books that I've read that I didn't think I was going to enjoy but actually do. So this is chapter 1, The Secret Agent. The scent and smoke of sweat and of casino are nauseating at 3 in the morning. Then the soul erosion produced by high gambling, a compost of greed and fear and nervous tension, becomes unbearable, and the senses awake and revolt from it. James Bond suddenly knew that he was tired. He always knew when his body or his mind had had enough, and he always acted on the knowledge. This helped him to avoid staleness and the sensual bluntness that breeds mistakes. He shifted himself unobtrusively away from the roulette he'd been playing and went to stand for a moment at the brass rail which surrounded breast high on the top of the table in the salle privée. Le Chiffre was still playing, and still, apparently, winning. There was an untidy pile of flecked 100-meal plaques in front of him. In the shadow of his thick left arm there nestled a discreet stack of the big yellow ones, worth £500,000 each. Bond watched the curious, impressive profile for a time, then he shrugged his shoulders to lighten his thoughts and moved away. The barrier surrounding the casse comes as high as your chin, and the cassier, who is generally nothing more than a minor bank clerk, sits on a stool and dips into his piles of notes and plaques. These are arranged on shelves. They're on a level behind the protecting barrier with your groin. The cassier has a coche and a gun to protect him, and to heave over the barrier and steal some notes and then vault back and get to the casino through the passages and doors would be impossible, and the cassiers generally work in pairs. Bond reflected on the problem as he collected the sheaf of 100,000 and then the sheaves of 10,000 franc notes. With another part of his mind, he had a vision of tomorrow's regular morning meeting of the casino committee. Monsieur Le Chiffre made 2 million. He played his usual game. Miss Fairchild made 1 million in an hour and then left. She executed 3 bancos of Monsieur Le Chiffre within an hour and then left. She played with coolness. Monsieur Vicomte de Vararan made 1 million too at roulette. He was playing the maximum on the first and last dozens. He was lucky. Then the Englishman, Mr. Bond, increased his winnings to exactly 3 million over 2 days. He was playing a progressive system on red at table 5. Duclos, the chef de partie, has the details. Seems that he is persevering and plays in maximums. He has luck. His nerves seem good. On the soirée, the chemin de fer won, the baccarat won, and the roulette won. The boule, which was again badly frequented, still makes its expenses. Merci, Monsieur Xavier. Merci, Monsieur de la Présidente. Or something like that, thought Bond as he pushed his way through the swing doors of the salle privée and nodded to the bored man in evening clothes whose job it is to bar your entry and your exit with electric foot switch which can lock the doors at any hint of trouble. And the casino committee would balance its books and break up into its homes or cafes for lunch. As for robbing the casse, in which Bond himself was not personally concerned, but only interested, he reflected that it would take 10 good men, and they would certainly have to kill 1 or 2 employees, and that anyway, you probably couldn't find 10 non-sequel killers in France, or in any other country for that matter. As he gave 1,000 francs to the vestiaire and walked down the steps of the casino, Bond made up his mind that Le Chiffre would be in no circumstances to try to rob Le Casse, and he put the contingency out of his mind. Instead, he explored the present physical sensations. He felt the dry, uncomfortable gravel under his evening shoes, the bed, harsh taste in his mouth, and the slight sweat under his arms. He could feel his eyes filling their sockets. The front of his face, his nose and antrum were congested. He breathed the sweet night air deeply and focused his senses on his wits. He wanted to know if anyone had searched his room since he'd left before dinner. He walked across the broad boulevard and through the gardens to the Hotel Splendide. He smiled at the concierge who gave him his key, number 45, the first floor, and took the cable. It was from Jamaica, and read, Kingston J.A., Bond Splendide Royal Les Yeux Sen Inferior Havana Cigar Production, all Cuban factories, 1915, 10 million, repeat, 10 million, stop. Hope this figure you require. Regards, De Silva. This meant that 10 million francs was on his way to him. It was the reply to a request Bond had sent the afternoon through Paris to his headquarters in London, asking for more funds. Paris had spoken to London, where Clement, the head of Bond's department, had spoken to M, who had smiled wryly and told the broker to fix it with the Treasury. Bond had once worked in Jamaica, and his cover on the Royal assignment was that of a very rich client of Messrs. Caffrey, the principal import and export firm of Jamaica. So he was being controlled through Jamaica, through a taciturn man who was head of the picture desk on the Daily Gleaner, the famous newspaper of the Caribbean. This man on the Gleaner, whose name was Fawcett, had been a bookkeeper for one of the leading turtle fisheries on the Cayman Islands. One of the men from the Caymans who had volunteered on the outbreak of war, he'd ended up as a paymaster's clerk in the small naval intelligence organisation in Malta. At the end of the war, when with a heavy heart he was due to return to the Caymans, he was spotted by the section of Secret Service concerned with the Caribbean. He was strenuously trained in photography and in some other arts, and, with the quiet connivance of an influential man in Jamaica, he found his way to the picture desk of the Gleaner. In the intervals between shifting photographs submitted by the great agencies, Keystone, Wide World, Universal, IMP, and Ruta Photo, he would get peremptory instructions by telephone from a man he'd never met to carry out certain simple operations, requiring nothing but absolute discretion, speed and accuracy. For these occasional services he received £20 a month, paid into his account with the Royal Bank of Canada by a fictitious relative in England. Fawcett's present assignment was to relay immediately to Bond full rates, the text of messages which he received at home by telephone from his anonymous contact. He had been told by his contact that nothing he would be asked to send would arouse suspicion of the Jamaican post office, so he was not surprised to find himself suddenly appointed string correspondent for the Maritime Press and Photo Agency, with press collect facilities to France and England on a further monthly retainer of £10. He felt secure and encouraged, had visions of the BEM, and made the first payment on a Morris Minor. He also brought a green eye shade, which he had long coveted, which helped him to impose his personality on the picture desk. Some of this background to his cable passed through Bond's mind. He was used to oblique control and rather liked it. He felt it feather-bedded him a little, allowed him to give or take an hour or two in his communications with M. He knew that this was probably a fallacy, that probably there was another member of the service at Royal Les Yeux who was also reporting independently, but it did give the illusion that he wasn't only 150 miles across the channel from that deadly office building near Regent's Park, being watched and judged by those few cold brains that made the whole show work. Just as Fawcett, the Cayman Islander in Kingston, knew that if he bought that Morris Minor outright instead of signing the hire purchase agreement, someone in London would probably know and want to know where the money had come from. Bond read the cable twice, tore the telegram form off the pad on the desk, why give them the carbon copies, and wrote his reply in capitals. Thanks. Information should suffice. Bond. He handed this to the concierge and put the cable signed to silver in his pocket. The employers, if any of the concierge, could bribe a copy of the local post office if the concierge hadn't already steamed the envelope open and read the cable upside down in Bond's hands. He took his key and said good night, and turned to the stairs, shaking his head at the liftman. Bond knew what an obliging danger signal a lift could be. He didn't expect anyone to be moving on the first floor, but he preferred to be prudent. Walking quietly on the balls of his feet, he regretted the hubris of his reply to M via Jamaica. As a gambler, he knew it was a mistake to rely on small capital. Anyway, M probably wouldn't let him have any more. He shrugged his shoulders and turned off the stairs into the corridor and walked softly to the door of his room. Bond knew exactly where the switch was, and with one flow of motion that he stood on the threshold of the door full open, the light on and a gun in his hand. The safe, empty room sneered at him. He ignored the half-open door of the bathroom, and locking himself in, he turned up the bed light and the mirror light and threw his gun on the settee beside the window. Then he bent down and inspected one of his own black hairs which still lay undisturbed where he'd left it before dinner, wedged on the drawer of the writing desk. Next he examined a faint trace of talcum powder on the inner rim of the porcelain handle of the clothes cupboard. It appeared immaculate. He went to the bathroom, lifted the cover of the lavatory cistern, verified the level of water against a small scratch on the copper ballcock. Doing all this, inspecting those minute burglar alarms, did not make him feel foolish or self-conscious. He was a secret agent, and still alive thanks to his exact attention to the detail of his profession. Routine precautions were to him no more unreasonable than they would be to deep-sea divers or a test pilot, or to any man earning danger money. Satisfied that his room had not been searched while he was at the casino, Bond undressed and took a cold shower. Then he lit his 70th cigarette of the day and sat down at the writing table with a thick wad of his stake money and winnings beside him, and entered some figures in a small notebook. Over the 2 days' play he was up exactly 3 million francs. In London he'd been issued with 10 million, and he'd asked London for a further 10. With this on its way in the local branch of Credit Lyonnais, his working capital amounted to 23 million francs, or some £23,000. For a few moments Bond sat motionless, gazing out of the window across a dark sea, and then he shoved the bundle of banknotes under the pillow. Of the ornate single bed, cleaned his teeth, turned out the lights, and climbed with relief between the harsh French sheets. For 10 minutes he lay on his left side, reflecting on the events of the day. Then he turned over and focused his mind towards the tunnel of sleep. His last action was to slip his right hand under the pillow, where it rested under the butt of a .38 Colt Police Positive with the sawn barrel. Then he slept, and with the warmth and humour of his eyes extinguished, his features relapsed into a taciturn mask, ironical, brutal, and cold.